Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Freo Big Footy podcast. This week we'll be recapping the game versus Western Bulldogs last week at Etihad Stadium, where Fremantle ended up winning reasonably comfortable victors, 13 goals 11.89 to 6 goals 15.51. And then we'll have a look at a bit of the ins and outs and then the big upcoming clash against the Crows, with the Crows obviously trying to keep their finals hopes alive and Fremantle trying to push for a top four spot. Joining us this week is our regular Victorian correspondent, Seppo. How are you, mate?
I am good and looking forward to another round of football.
Excellent. Obviously, you already got to watch the game firsthand last week at Etihad Stadium.
I did get thoughts. I did get the pleasure of witnessing another 4 points, a hard-earned game. I think the guys struggled early on, but really put the acid on the Bulldogs and provided that. We capitalised on a lot of our forward entries. I think Ross made mention at the post-match press conference that, I think Bulldogs had a lot more disposals and clearances and inside 50s, but we just made the most of it. So it shows that sometimes it's all just about good kicking and good use of the footy. And I think we're slowly winding up to our better form, even though it wasn't one for the archives to be rewatched. It was a unclean game, but it was at least a lot of signs that the guys are more consistent, and it was good to see some performances like what Hill put on show. It was just sort of good to see some of these guys step up and just take their game to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Stephen Hill had a very sort of Brownlow-worthy type game, and his 4 goals stood out in a game that didn't reach any great heights, as you mentioned. Obviously, Crowley also did a terrific job on Ryan Griffin, keeping him to season low, 3 kicks. And 7 handballs. So obviously those two were the big standouts, and obviously a little bit of concern early for Fremantle as well, with Nathan Fyfe coming off with a bit of a tweak to his ankle and sort of never really managed to get into the game after that either, just struggled a little bit all day. So, but I suppose in a good or a bad sign for Fremantle, guys like Mundy only had 17 touches, so some of our prime movers who we normally have up there probably didn't have their best game, yet we still managed to get away with the chocolates.
I suppose when you look at that Fyfe injury, he did come off for a while, but he still had, I think, 83% time on ground. So he was quiet for a bit, and they rested him forward, and he seems to be managed well, and will get back up there this week. I think the guys that really stood out well was that, like I said earlier, the job that Crowley did on Griffin. I suppose it was quite fortunate that Boyd was a last-minute exclusion, and really made for us easier that it was only Liberatoria that really hurt us. Crowley did a stunning job, and I think he earned the coaches' votes, and probably for me, the coach in there. And the way that, from what I saw, the way that the younger guys like Neil and Sutcliffe going hard at the footy was a sight to see as well.
Yeah, interestingly, Western Bulldogs had 4 players who scored more possessions than our top possession getter in Barlow, with Higgins, McRae, Murphy and Liberatore all getting above 29 touches. But as you said, it's just the amount of damage they can do with them, and I think that's, for them, if you sort of curtail the guys like Griffin, who's their classier ball user, it certainly didn't help them when they were trying to bring that ball inside 50. Obviously the other sort of talking point a little bit was the good game of Zach Clark, who sort of showed again that he's when he's up and firing, he took some really telling marks around the game, and even better, probably some good contested marks.
Yeah, I think he picked up 3 contested marks, and some of them even just, I was sitting in that front row of the cheer squad, and you could see the kick unfold before it actually happened. The way that Clark was running towards a pack, I just knew it was going to end up, and a couple of times I said, watch Zach mark this. As soon as it left the kicker's foot, I said, Clark's going to grab this, and he clunked a good crucial marks, especially that sort of safety kick out from the our defensive 50. He seems to provide a bit more and a better lead than what Aaron does sometimes down the wings, and really helps us get that rebound or that slingshot happening sometimes. And he's not doing as much in the ruck in terms of the hit-out sense, but in terms of what he's providing around the ground is a perfect foil for Mr. 211, and what he does around the ground is just fantastic.
Yeah, interestingly, they did double-team Pavlich all afternoon, and you could just sort of, see that those other guys just weren't able to. We just, as you said, need that other target to be able to stand up. And although Main had a few bits and pieces, he's still probably not having that same impact on the forward line as he did last year. But it was great to see Ballantyne once again have another decent game away, particularly away from Subiaco, where he probably hasn't always played as well as he does at home. And I know that's been a focus for himself this year, and it's great to see him kick another 3 on the weekend.
Yeah, it was great to see that he's actually brought the home boots away, and it's been a while since we've seen, excluding round one, I don't think he's really performed well recently. It's always Walters that seems to step up, but in his absence, he certainly put on a good show, and his forward pressure was relentless at some stage, and it's been over there the last couple of games, but I just love watching him when he's standing on the mark. He's not a tall person, but the pressure he provides when the opposition have a kick in, you just know that he's going to chase it, and they're so hesitant to take that little side kick and try and play on, because you know that Ballantyne will get a hand to it, or he causes them to miss kick it. It's it's a sight to behold, and I just wish we could have Walters out there too, but they're sort of working different, pushing different people forward. I noticed Crowley snuck forward a couple of times. Clark got up there, and although I think he missed 2 opportunities, he kicked 2 behinds, but we are sort of finding ways to goal to win the game, but I think we're just still missing a bit more of a bit of a class of another person to give Ballantyne a bit of a chop out. But thank God he stood up, because those 3 goals are handy, especially when we really are struggling to get over that 100 points each week.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had something like 18 inside 50s last week in the first quarter, and there's been some games, particularly even at Subi last year, where we allowed the opposition barely to get over that for the whole game. So certainly, they absorbed the pressure very well, and their spread from defence was impressive in the way they used it. But I don't think our line would be happy with that sort of that many inside 50s, because against the better sides, we will struggle if we allow those teams that much ball. The other interesting thing was good to see Ibbotson come back. Came on in the subs role and took a little bit of time to get up to the speed of the game, but then looked better as the game went on, and probably a bit disappointing for Sheridan as well, I think. Sheridan had a chance to probably cement himself in the side, and being probably one of our better runners, it was probably not a good sign for him, the fact that he got subbed halfway through the third quarter with only 9 touches. Yeah,
he did sort of go missing a bit, and only probably got in on 1 or 2 of the scoring chains when we pushed forward. But being a young kid, and not too many games under his belt, he will sort of go missing at stages, but it'll be interesting to see if they pursue his role in there, and whether he's better as a sub or giving him that full game. It'll just be interesting, but it's an option for him to get back to Waffle, put some good form, and come back again. At some stage it will click for him, but maybe he's that type that would just come and go as a side, and form will fluctuate until he gets close to that 50-game experience mark that some of these younger guys are closer getting to. But that Ibbotson return is great, because we really have sort of missed someone else with his kicking. Hasn't been too bad so far, but at least that another avenue out from the half-back line, because Sutcliffe and Johnson seem to be doing all the rebounding for us at the moment. Once we get Ibbo up and running, it's going to be another string to our already great defensive unit.
Yeah, and he did look good. The other, obviously, when we look at the key stats across the whole game, Fremantle, when you look at the number of clearances, contested ball, uncontested ball, disposals, inside 50s, normally if you look at those 3 things and you win those, they generally tend to win the game. But, at the end of the day, as Ross Lyon said, it's sort of, you've got to only won the one that counts is on the scoreboard. And, and one we certainly didn't win on Seppo was the amount of free kicks. So 19-4, and 4 free kicks was probably the lowest I've ever seen. It's very unusual.
Yeah, and I did. I mentioned on the board, but in the umpires' review on SEN Talkback Radio here, they I think it was McBurney mentioned. I think with a game review, there was probably 2 free kicks they actually missed giving us. So might have even been 1 or 2 more that they didn't want to mention. But it was sort of good to see that the umpires came out and saying we were sort of robbed of 1 or 2 more free kicks. I think they were for holding ball decisions where they weren't paid. Well, we put on a good tackle, but
I thought Pavlich missed one. I thought Pavlich missed it, got just about down. He was draped all over him, Roughhead, in round about the 45-metre mark.
Yeah,
going out probably the opposite end of where you normally go down there, Seppo. But as you said, at the end of the day, as I said, I'd rather them probably call not enough, but it's just unusual to have that bigger discrepancy. Normally, even if they notice, sometimes there is that little bit of shape up, and granted, some of them were there, but as you said, it was just unusual to have that only sort of 1 free kick a quarter on average.
And I can understand the ones that the umpires can't see or they have good vision of, and that's understanding. But when it's happening a bit too much, or when you see clear, I think there was one or two clear pushes where a Bulldogs player would come behind and push. It was either Clark or McFarlane or someone under the ball. I think there's a couple of times there where there might have been a free kick paid, but they seem to be letting those one-on-one contests go. But I don't like it when it's a push forward underneath the ball.
No, absolutely not. All right. Anything else you want to add, Seppo, before we move on from that game?
No, it's just well, like I say, by the result, getting the margin, I was a bit disappointed we couldn't push for a couple more points because I spoke to 3 people after the game and they all had bets on Freo to win by 40 plus or 39.5, and we just fell short of the I think the line or roughly what it was, and it's a bit annoyed, with the way we sort of just took the foot off the gas, and I think the Bulldogs kicked the last goal and just cut the margin back a bit from where we all thought it would be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, as you said, I think it was just more a case to take the 4 points and we move on because there wasn't a lot of highlights in that game. It was probably just one of those professional workman-like efforts you want to see. And at the end of the day, provided we get no injuries, I think it's a good outing anytime you sort of get that win. And Eddie had. Obviously, Seppo, there was a bit of talk as well about the roof and the rain and stuff. Was it noticeably greasy?
It was. I was at the ground 3 hours before the start of the game, so 3 hours before the start of the game, and I actually walked up the race and felt the grass, and it was wet, and there was actually areas of the seating, even inside the stadium, that was quite wet, and they had cleaners going through wiping down seats. So even though the roof was closed a certain period of time, there was a lot of rain that fell and precipitation around that really affected the ground, and it didn't really dry up at all. So I don't know if it really affected. You couldn't really see it on TV. Well, from where I sat, you couldn't really see the performance, but certainly out there, and when we brought the banner out to the ground, you could definitely see there was a bit of moisture on the ground, and it was a bit slippery. So I don't know if everyone's been talking about sprinklers on, but there was definitely rain there that came through before they closed the roof.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they change it in the future, but I can't see it happening. Anyway, moving on. This week, obviously, another crucial game coming up for Fremantle, and back at home after probably been a little bit of a break with the bye and since the Geelong game. But Fremantle with 3 ins this week, just coming into the 25. Alex Silvani coming back in, along with Matt Taberner and Brady Gray. Interestingly, Colin Sylvia dropped out of the 25 this week, and Taberner's come in. So, we talked a little bit before, Seppo, with obviously they probably want to give Sylvia another crack at Peel, and without that sort of questioning about when he's going to come back, and just let him go down and sort of see if he can find his way back into that side.
Yeah, I suppose it's a good opportunity with the Peel game on the Saturday to get a run in, and hopefully it'll be interesting to see out of the way the squad goes who's the game day emergency, and the other 2 guys get the opportunity to play for Peel the game beforehand. Who do you reckon, if we are looking at those 3 guys into the squad, Silvani, Gray and Taberner, so no change to last week, who would you think would be the more likely to cover for insurance?
Well, obviously there's been a bit of a doubt, you think, on Fife and Hill. Both they're expected to play, but that's been the talk all week. But so, if you're looking at that, you'd have to probably go Gray would probably be the most likely, because you couldn't imagine Taberner coming in or Silvani, because they probably want to have a little bit more of a runner. The other option is, unless they've, and we'll get to Adelaide in a minute, but obviously Adelaide have 3 pretty decent tall forwards in their forward line, so whether they look at maybe bringing Silvani in and then using Johnson as the loose man. Ross Lyon said earlier in the week it's would be unlikely for him to play the 4 of them, but if you were going to do it, probably game against Adelaide or Sydney would be the 2 games you consider with the tall forwards that both those sides have.
I suppose with the Silvani name, that's almost the backup again for McFarlane. He might be a constant emergency named all the time, just in case one of these guys don't pull up well. But McFarlane seemed to play the game out really well, so it's probably just another reward for effort after being named and not playing last week. They're showing signs that he not drop his head. He's aimed there. He's close. He's seconds away from playing based on maybe a fitness test with someone else. But I'd love to see Gray get a game. I'd prefer if we did go in unchanged, but maybe if Gray did come in, it might be for someone like Tommy Sheridan. Maybe just give Gray the sub if Ibbetson's ready to take a full game.
Well, I mean, that'll be the interesting one. I mean, Sheridan obviously looks like the player who's most likely to be in the gun.
Mm.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, for the Crows, they've got 3 ins this week, just coming into the 25. No outs at the moment with Luke Thompson, Cam Ellis-Yolman and Sean McKernan coming in. There has been some talk or sort of a little bit of scuttlebutt about whether Jacobs would be right to go this week in the ruck. So obviously he'll be a crucial cog for them, and maybe that's why McKernan's been brought into the side as backup there in case Jacobs doesn't get up.
And I think there's talk as well as about Walker maybe being a late out for them, but it all depends. I suppose maybe that's why they've named McKernan as another taller guy there to provide that option if Jacobs or Walker don't get up for this. But I suppose we'll have a fair idea tomorrow and once they fly their players over.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tex Walker, if he's not playing, that's going to be a big out for the Crows. I mean, that's going to make a big difference because with their 3 talls, they've got obviously Walker, Jenkins and Podsiadly, and even Sam Kerridge is a reasonable size. So they've actually got 3 pretty decent power forwards down there, and obviously with Eddie Betts and Charlie Cameron, who have also 2 good small forwards. So their forward line's definitely a strength and probably arguably in the top 2 or 3 in the league, I think, if they're all up and running. So, I mean, obviously Sydney has got a very strong forward line, and I wouldn't put Adelaide much behind them. All their players are pretty solid down there. So it'll certainly give our defence a fair workout this week, and obviously Dangerfield will rotate through there a little bit as well.
Yeah, I've just got nightmares thinking back to the matchups of Dangerfield on Crowley, I think the last few times where he's managed to drag him forward and then push him over the ball and get a couple of goals. And even Taylor Walker when he was matched up on Silvani in that semi-final, was it?
Yeah.
Year before. Yeah, so those 2 guys are the ones that scare me the most on paper, but I think we can cover for the rest and do a pretty good job of accounting for them. So if Adelaide have any chance, we're all short price favourites at $1.16, but if they do lose one of those key taller guys, I think it will swing in our favour even more. But I hope we play them at full strength to give our guys a fair effort, and really hope that we play really well for this game and just continue our launch into the second half of the season.
I mean, the key thing I've watched a few Adelaide games this year is their midfield reminds me a little bit like West Coast. They're very good at going one direction when the ball's
not enough defensive running, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They sort of don't work both ways hard enough, and as you said, when they've got the ball and plenty of it, they look $1 million. But when they don't, they can get exposed quite easily. And I mean, obviously, losses to Melbourne this year, and obviously also Carlton, I think they lost to as well. So, I mean, they've beaten some reasonable sides. I mean, granted, Walker didn't play those games, but in the midfield, you've got guys. I mean, Sloane's a pretty good player, and obviously Dangerfield and Douglas sort of gets under the radar a bit, but you've got some other guys in there like McKay and Thompson. They love getting the ball, but they don't always necessarily love running the other way either. So it'll certainly be a fair test for the midfield of Adelaide as well to see how they go.
I suppose if we can deny them the forwards, that's going to be the way of winning. And it was interesting just watching the performance last week. Fife and Mundy had down games from their usual standard, and Barlow was quiet, but accumulated it well. So if we can get those guys working well with Sandilands and Clark, I think we're going to go a long way to winning this game. And I think you're right there with some of those guys that Thompson and McKay, don't really work hard defensively. So we've really got to push them, and hopefully conditions suit us on the ground. I think it's 21 degrees and cloudy there on Sunday. So I'd love to be able to play a nice running game and let Hill and Pearce dominate on the outside again and cut them up with our accurate kicking and just deny them the ball, because I think that's the way to go. We can't give too much of it and cut down that supply, because they are certainly a threat. I think we cover them. Our defence is better, our midfield's better, but our forwards, just the way they're functioning, the fact that we don't have Walters, you'd almost give them the tick for say their forwards are certainly better than ours at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's obviously been the talk this week as well about Daniel Talia, and he's obviously having a pretty solid season in full-back, and you obviously think he'll take Pavlich, but that'll leave an interesting matchup for Rutten as well. So
they'll probably double team him.
Yeah, well, that's
the way we've been playing more of a not a solo forward, but really leaving Pavlich out there with just one or two guys around him. And the successful sides, I think North Melbourne did it well, where they double team Pav, and I think Sydney even did it as well in our 2 losses there. So you think they'd be smart and really try and get Talia and as well as someone else to help.
Yeah, and that's where it's going to be critical that obviously whoever our resting ruckman, whether it be Zach Clark or Sandlands, is down there, is not only be able to take a contest, but make that second guy accountable there. I mean, Fremantle will obviously play the +1 because obviously they like having Johnson in that position. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Adelaide will also be able to have the +1 in that case. So it'll be interesting to see which way. Obviously, they'll double team Pavlich, so it's really critical that, like as you said, Main gets on his bike or have a Ballantyne at his feet, just to make sure we do kick enough goals. Who do you think? Obviously, the obvious matchup would be Crowley to Dangerfield. Do you think that will happen, or do you think maybe that they'll consider Rory Sloane, who also is a pretty handy player, and obviously on his day he did carve us up a couple of years ago, I remember, at Subiaco, and but obviously Dangerfield would be the obvious choice for where he'll start.
Yeah, you think you'd really want to match those two up. I think Mzungu's lifted his game a notch this year, and the way he runs both ways, I think it would be great to have a run with Roll on Sloane, put him on the wing and hurt Sloane the other way, because that's the way that we can make the most of it. And I think his defensive side, Mzungu, is pretty good and capable of taking Sloane, but Sloane is, after Dangerfield, the second biggest threat, I reckon. It'd be hard to see Thompson or any of their other real midfielders get a run with jobs, so hopefully we can limit Dangerfield, and even if he does go forward or back or wherever he decides to play, that Crowley runs around with him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like as you said, Mzungu can more likely drag Sloane forward, and he'll have that bit of an aerial edge over Sloane, because Sloane's not super tall by any stretch. And I think, as you said, it'll probably more like, I mean, when we played them a couple of years ago, Adelaide was struggling for forwards, and obviously they tried to isolate Dangerfield down there. I don't think with that lineup they've got in their forward line now, that probably Dangerfield, and I don't think they can afford to either have too many, I think they need them Dangerfield up in the midfield. So it'll be interesting to see how Adelaide use Dangerfield on the day. I think he'll have to play more midfield than forward.
Yeah.
I mean, Charlie Cameron and Eddie Betts will certainly give them a bit of a toe, and we've struggled a bit with small forwards this year, so it'll be interesting to see how, obviously, Lee Spurr will take one of them, and I think he'll probably end up, you'd think, have to start on Eddie Betts, and then and then obviously Charlie Cameron will get picked up by probably Sutcliffe, you'd have to think, to start with.
And I haven't watched too many of the Crows game, but Charlie Cameron's quite quick, isn't he? So the Sutcliffe matchup would be suited to him more, unless Ibbotson dropped back in and got that matchup.
Yeah, Sutcliffe I think would be the better matchup to start with Cameron. I mean, he played I watched quite a few games for him for Swan Districts last year, and he actually is quite towing. He's a good finisher as well, so he'll. You certainly can't just sort of let him sort of run around on his own, because he will carve you up. So yeah, it'll certainly be an interesting duel, I think, in that, for me, that sort of our defence versus their forwards, particularly if Walker does play. I think it'll be interesting to see how they operate, because I think it'll be a sort of good test for our defence. But I think this game will be clearly won in the midfield, and how Fremantle use the spread and how they use their ball, bringing it forward, as opposed to the Adelaide side, where they do have quite a significant edge in height and sort of size against the Adelaide side.
Now, do you think they're going to make the same mistake as McCartney did for us and let Stephen Hill run 3, or do you think they'll send the Carriage tag or whoever? I'm not sure if it's Douglas or the other guys that sort of play the more of a tagging role for them, go to a Hill, and maybe Fife and Mundy can get off the chain a bit.
Well, as you said, you've got to decide which guys are going to sort of give you the least amount of grief. I mean, after last week, you'd have to think that Hill would be one guy they don't want to leave, and that's where, probably Pearce needs to stand up a bit. Like, I thought Pearce did a few good things last week, but I thought he did a couple of shocking ones as well. Like, there was a couple of times where I think Johnson made some really good position along the wing there, and all he had to do was lob it over the top to Johnson, and it would have carried the chain, and he tried to make spot a pass 30, 40 metres down the road to, down to Pavlich on a 1-on-2 contest,
Yeah.
I just don't think his decision-making was that good last week.
Yeah, Pearce's kicking is a bit down on what he started the year with. I thought he'd, got over his bad kicking and really found form. I remember that round 1 game was great. So if Hill does cop the tag, I hope that Daniel Pearce can get more into the midfield, push forward, and be a bit better. We know he can kick, but it's more or less his decision making and pick out the right targets and hopefully hurt the opposition, because I suppose that's what you want. If Hill's copping the tag, someone else isn't, and you want them to lift and be damaging them well and make them second guess that call, because I reckon Hilly would have loved it when he didn't cop a hard tag, and eyes opened up and off he ran a couple of times for the gut. So hopefully we can do that again on the big expanses of Subi. It always gets the crowd involved. So hopefully one of them's doing it for us.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how who Adelaide decide to use on Ballantyne as well. Obviously they've got little, like Brodie Smith, and Luke Brown's he's come along pretty well in the last 2 years, and obviously Laird down there as well. So it'll be interesting to see which way you'd have to think that Otten will probably take Maine. You'd think that'd be a pretty reasonable matchup for them. So it'll be interesting to see how they structure up down back as well. Obviously, as you said, if they're going to look at double teaming Pavlich. I said I don't know a lot about any of their new inclusions, Ellis Yeoman and Luke Thompson. Have you sort of heard or seen anything about them, Seppo, at all?
Not too much. I don't even know what type of the players, if they're defenders or smaller midfielders. So you expect maybe them to go change. I might do a bit of research now on the Adelaide board and see what they're like. But you reckon they'd go in unchanged and maybe have McKernan across as cover. So I think we can account for Crows quite well. And it'd be
interesting to see. Obviously, I think there'll be a bit of scrutiny this week, as you said, after the kick last week, and obviously having our mate Dean Margetts back in this week. So haven't had him for a while at Subi, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there as well. So hopefully it'll be, as I said, it's been pretty reasonable actually all year. I thought the umpiring is, to be honest, I think it's a lot better this year than it has been in previous years in terms of letting the game flow and getting rid of those ticky touchwood free kicks. So let's just hope that it continues that way this weekend as well. So what do you think, Seppo? What's your feeling for this week?
I'm thinking roughly the same margin against the Bulldogs. Not the saying that Adelaide are a similar side to the Bulldogs, but I think we're going to improve, but Crows are a better side. So I think roughly the same 39 point margin is roughly where I see the game going to, based on good conditions. We're at home. We haven't really strengthened our side too much, but I just think that we can win. We're not going to absolutely flog them, although it would be nice. But I think Adelaide will put up a good fight, and it's just interesting because they've got a bit to play for. Because if they lose this game, they'll be 2 games outside the 8, so they'll really be pushing. They're 9th at the moment, but it's going to make it hard for them, and we've just got to keep on winning. And you'd expect us to grind out a good result.
Yeah, I mean, we just can't afford to, if we want to keep in touch with that top 4 as well, we can't afford to be looking to drop game. We can't afford to really drop too many games either. So both teams, as you said, will have plenty to play for. I don't think it'll be quite as close. I think it'll be a bit closer than it was last week. And I think Fremantle are capable of winning, but I think it'll probably be more like that 4-goal type margin, that 25 points. But as you said, if like Adelaide seem to either run us right to the hill or they sort of get blown out. So it'll be interesting to see which way it goes, because we've always had some really pretty close games and tough encounters against them. So, but over the last few years, we have managed to get the wood on them a little bit more than we had in the past. They were a bit of a bogey side for us early on, but we seem to have played pretty well against them in the past few years. But as you said, they've got plenty to play for this week if they want to keep in touch with the 8. Any other things you want to bring up, Seppo, on the board, or likewise before we head off for the day?
No, just good luck to everyone in their tipping, and hope they're all their Supercoach and fantasy sides are all doing well. And let's just hope we have a good run in, and we'll start to look at hopefully a whole bunch of consecutive wins coming up, and make sure you get in there every week to put your votes in for our Big Footy MVP awards. And that's it.
All right, no worries. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of crowd we get to on Sunday with a big game coming up. So we've sort of kept our crowds. It's certainly been an increase in the previous years, and even though it's a sellout every week, there still never seems to be a full house there. So just a reminder to those guys as well, you can resell your tickets to the club if you need to, if you're not going to make it. So give those people who aren't members who would like to go along to a game or two a chance to go along and have a look. Because the more full house that we get, the better for it is for us as well. All right, Seppo, thanks again for joining us this week, mate.
No worries. Enjoy the game, and we'll see you all next week.
Absolutely, and for those people going to the game this week, enjoy it, and let's hope that Fremantle have another great win. That's it for this week, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye for now.